I want to tell you a story about the eagle and the crow. This story, first time I heard this story, it happened when I was traveling out to Newfoundland, and we were doing presentations there for a number of students, from kindergarten right on up to high school. And these were native people in Conn River. They had just received recognition as people still there in Newfoundland, recognized Mi'kmaq community, Conn River. So they were celebrating that, and they invited a number of us there to go and talk about native traditions, customs, and values, and including legends. And we were talking to many different classrooms, and we got to the little kids, and we got just done telling stories, and this one person from Eskasoni, his name is Billy Herney, and he looked at us and he said, I don't know what to say really. I don't know what to talk about anymore. I've gone classroom to classroom, and I feel like I'm all talked out. And the only thing that I could think of to tell the story here with kids is the eagle and the crow. Is that there one time, a long time ago, animals communicate like we do. There was this crow who was flying about, and he was looking for food. He was having a difficult time. He was flying along this river, and he was looking for things that he thought might be food. And he would stop and pick up things that were shiny, things were bright colored, and he'd turn them over, and he would look at them and see if he'd try to find food in it somehow. And he'd move things around, check things out, and maybe there was a cork there or something, and no, that's not food. And then he'd fly over here. He'd fly up on the branch, and he'd look down to see a little bit further, get a different view. And all of a sudden he saw this eagle just soaring real slow around. And he was wondering for a second. He was just, like crows do. He was looking at that eagle, and the crow went, and the eagle was flying really slow, and came up to this tree with this big branch sticking out, and he went and just landed on that big branch, and he was looking down, and the eagle with his sharp eyes could see really far, and was looking at the river and how the river was flowing. And he saw something moving in the water, and all he did was open his wings, and then he started soaring right down, and in just a matter of seconds he went down, and he straightened his claws out like that. You could see him reaching out, and whoosh, pulled out of the water, pulled out this salmon, this big salmon. He went over to the shore and landed on the shore. And he was standing beside the salmon after taking the salmon out. And the crow saw this. And the crow was absolutely amazed to see that. And he flew right over there as fast as he could. And he was standing there, and he was looking at the salmon like that. And he was looking at Mr. Eagle, and he was saying, wow, how did you do that? Wow, that's fantastic. Wow, such a big salmon. And Mr. Eagle is standing there just stern, and he looks at the crow and says, Mr. Crow, I've been watching you. You've been having a tough time getting your meal. You know what? I'm going to welcome you to this meal here. I want you to come home with me, and I'll get Mrs. Eagle to cook up the salmon, and you just come by at a certain time, and we'll have you for supper. They'll invite you there. So the crow is just excited. Yes, wow, yes, I'll be there. So by and by, the eagle takes the salmon home, and Mrs. Eagle prepares up the salmon for supper, and the crow comes in, and is expecting it's going to have a good supper, and he says, well, Mrs. Eagle has, oh, by the way, Mr. Crow, do you like onions? Of course, I love onions. I love anything. I'm hungry, I'll eat anything. So Mrs. Eagle comes out with the salmon all prepared, and they have a meal all prepared there at the table, and he's just helping himself with the salmon, and he is just by himself, with this meal, and he just enjoys it. So that's the best meal I ever had in a long, long time. Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Eagle, for that salmon. I don't know how to thank you. I really don't know how to thank you. But I'll tell you what. Tomorrow, I'm going to go down to that same spot where you caught that salmon, and I'll catch a salmon. And I'm going to invite you for supper. You watch. So the eagle kind of looks at him. So you'll see, the crow says, you'll see, and he takes off. The next day, sure enough, the crow is there by that river, and he's looking real sharp into the water, and he's flying up over here in that branch where the eagle sat. Can't seem to see really clear, so he flies down again a little closer down low, and he looks into the water, and he's looking at the ripples, and how does he see those? Right there. And he sees something moving, and he's looking around, and now here comes Mr. Eagle gliding around again, and he's going to land on that tree, and Mr. Crow, he's like, I got to prove myself now. I got to catch that eagle before he does. It's going to make me look foolish if I don't do anything now. This is the time. That movement, that shadow over there in the water, that's got to be the salmon. And he's looking up at Mr. Eagle. He's got to do this now, and it's time for him to show off because he's here. So he goes and flies and tries to glide as fancy as the eagle did when he went down, and reaches out and bang! Whoa! And he starts floating down the river. Mr. Eagle sees that and swoops down, grabs Mr. Crow out of the water, shakes him off, and fans him with his big wings, and wakes him up and says, Mr. Crow, are you all right? What happened? I thought you were going to grab a salmon there. What's that? Mr. Crow looks up and kind of shakes his head and points and says, Rock! Rock! Now that's why to this very day you'll hear the crow saying, Rock! But you see, the moral of the story is, don't try to be what you're not. See, Mr. Crow, he can fly, he can see, but not as keen and as good as the eagle can. So the eagle has very special gifts, what he is. He can do certain things, and not very many can do what the eagle can do. The eagle is given special wings and special sight for him to do that, and claws to do that. Like these claws here that you see here on this one, the eagle claw right there. Really sharp eagle claws. So don't try to be what you're not. Be as best that you can be for what you are. That's the moral of the story. I hope.
This next story I want to talk about is about the little people, Wolostiqiyik. And this is a story that was passed on from generations to generations. And this story is about the what we call the water spirits. As other elders have mentioned, that we have spirits of the forest, spirits of the water, spirits of the air, because some of the little people are just sounds in the air, and they make like chattering sounds, you know. And the ones under water, that you see them dancing just above, and they come out in the morning when the fog is right above the earth. That's when they'll come out. And the ones who play in the sand, they make little things out of the clay, and they'll make little clay baskets or little clay furniture or little clay things, and they're on the riverbank. So the ones I'm going to talk about are the ones on the riverbank. And one time, grandmother's responsibility, Nukmasik, was always to take their grandchildren to pick medicines so that they would never have to depend on things that had to be bought. So our responsibility is to teach our grandchildren how to use cedar for headaches, how to use sweetgrass for healing spirits, how to use gilhus husk for those tickling of the throat and those kind of things. So every morning, Nokmas would take her granddaughter out to pick medicine before school. And this one time, the little girl looked over by the riverbank, and she saw the little people playing and having fun. And she told her, Nokmas, look, can I go down there and play with them? But sometimes little people don't show themselves to adults. They only show themselves to children because they carry the joy of children, that joy of playfulness. So grandmother didn't see anybody down there, but the little girl could see them. And so, of course, grandmother, not seeing them, says, no, you can't go near there. It's too dangerous. The water's too high. And every day she asked, and every day the grandmother said, no, it's too dangerous. So one morning, the granddaughter decided, I'm going to pretend that I'm sick. And she told her grandmother, I'm not feeling good today. Can I stay home and I'll rest? And the grandmother said, all right, but make sure you stay in bed. So the grandmother allowed the little girl to stay in bed, and she went on to pick her medicine. So the little girl waited for the door to close, and then she peeked out the window and she could see her grandmother walking down the trail with her basket to pick her medicines. And then she got dressed real quick. She went down outside. She went down on the riverbank to play with the little people. She had such an awesome time because they climbed on rocks, they throw sand at each other and water at each other, and she was really having a good time. And then the little people said, it's time for us to have some tea. So as they were sitting down, drinking little teeny tiny cups of tea, the little girl took a zip, and all of a sudden she started to fall asleep. And when she fell asleep, she was in a deep sleep. When she woke up, she said, I better go home before my grandmother gets home. So the little girl went back to her bed, pretended that she was there all day. When the grandmother came in to check up on her, she asked her, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling much better, thank you, Nokmas. But the grandmother knew she'd been outside because her hair was covered with little teeny tiny braids. The little girl didn't see herself, so she didn't know that the little people had put their signature braids all over her head. So the grandmother asked, have you been anywhere today? And the little girl says, nope, another braid started. You sure you didn't go anywhere today? Another braid started. So then when she went in, the grandmother said, get ready for dinner. It's time for us to have our meal. The little girl went into the bathroom to wash her hands. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she realized all these braids. She tried to undo them, but she couldn't do it. She was frightened, so she put a hat on to cover her braids. And the grandmother said, you must take your hat off. And then she started to confess. I'm sorry, Nokmas. I did go play by the river, and her braids started to come undone. Miss Gain, Abijil, I'm so sorry, but I had so much fun with them. Another braid started to come undone. And as she finished her story, her hair came back the way that it was before the little people braided her hair. And the grandmother just said, it's not nice to tell lies. And little people are teaching you that because it shows, when we braid our hair, it's braided in teachings. And so those are teachings. So little people have taught you how to always tell the truth. Nitapsim.
This story I want to tell you is about what happened to me one summer. What I was doing in the summertime, I wasn't doing much work, but I decided to cut some pulp and a few logs and some firewood. And I was in the woods, and what I was doing, I was setting what they call native fashion. My legs were crossed, I was sitting right like this, and I had a cup of tea. I was sitting like this. I had my tea here, I had my chainsaw sitting there, and it was a hot day in July. Oh my goodness. And I didn't really feel too much like cutting, but I said, well, I'm going to cut. Anyway, while I was sitting there, do you ever get that feeling when somebody's watching you? Like I felt that feeling, eh? So what I did is I turned like this there, and the moose was right here, a cow moose. She had her head right down trying to get my smell. You see what happened is the wind was coming this way, and she couldn't get my smell. So what happened is, when I got that feeling and I looked, there was a clump of trees in front of me. Oh, they were 8, 10 feet high. And when I looked there and I saw her, I got a surprise. But the surprise was actually my body got a shot of adrenaline. Adrenaline is like gas. I got a shot of gas. And I threw the tea in her face, and she went like this. She lifted right up in the air, and by the time she had her head up there, I was on the top of the tree. And I got on the top of the tree, and so I looked around. Looking around, I seen it was a cow, eh? So I figured, I said, well, if it's a cow, she must have a calf. Sure enough, there was a calf going by over there like that. And what happens is, the hair stood up on her back, like that. And she went, and I was still up in that tree. And anyway, she went around on that side, and she only started to walk away when the calf was around there. Eh? She started to walk slowly. But can you imagine a big animal like that, weighing over 600, probably 800 pounds, sneaking through the bushes? What it does is it puts each hoof into the under the blueberry bushes. In a dry, hot summer, I never heard nothing, but I had a feeling because I'm a hunter. I come from the hunters. My mother comes from the Miramichi, and they're known as the hunters, but also the crossbearers. And maybe I can tell you a story about the crossbearers later on. But a long time ago, we used to put crosses on our head and on our cheeks like that, and we used to put tattoos marking that we were from the crossbearers. And my mother's from the Beaver clan here in Medivanagia. But the thing is, I got such a surprise, and I went up that tree so fast. It was a clump of trees, and I always wondered, what would happen if I confronted a moose face to face? And here was the opportunity. Wow, did I ever go up there? So you know what I did? I came down a tree, and I seen her walking away. And my grandfather always said, be careful in the woods, he said. A moose will kick you. It doesn't bite you like a horse. A horse will bite you and twist. But he said a moose will kick you with his feet. And I saw some photography done one time where a moose came out chasing a dog and it was kicking his feet out like that. So I was well safe up there, so I gradually came down the tree. I said, well, I guess she's not going to come back. So what happened after that, I said, well, I'm going to cut some wood. But did you ever get the feeling of what happens when the adrenaline hits you? My knees were shaking like this, and it felt like there was no feeling in the knees, in the knee joint. It was just like as if my whole body was like a jelly, like this. And after my adrenaline came down, I felt good. I looked around and said, well, I guess I'm not going to cut any wood today. So you know what I did? I picked up my chainsaw and picked up my gas, took my gloves, and away I went home. So my wife said to me, she said, how come you're home so early? Well, I said, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. So that's the story of how my encounter with a moose, a cow moose in the woods. So if I were you in the woods, never trust an animal. Of course, that animal wants to protect her young, but never, trust them. And another thing is, don't stare at an animal, because that's an aggression. If you see an animal, look at him from your peripheral vision on the corner of your eye, and then walk. So maybe next time I'll tell you a story how I encountered a bear.
Well, Ewan, well, Arlen, thank you for watching.